This fisherman died in tragic circumstances, and today I'll tell you his story. Arthur Luce was born in Brancaster Staithe, Norfolk on the 9th of March 1884, and like many in the North Norfolk village, his father was a fisherman. Arthur was the middle child of 9. The family lived in the Green, and many other members of the Luce family lived in the village. By the age of 16, Arthur worked as a fisherman, where he worked alongside his brother Bernard. In February 1910, he was fined 2 shillings and 6 pence for killing game without a licence. He pleaded ignorance and told the police officer he never knew woodcock which he had shot was game. In June 1910, he was summoned for assaulting his cousin John Luce at Brancaster. He was accused of striking him 2 or 3 times and knocking him down. Witnesses said they saw Arthur strike John, but complainant never struck back. Arthur said his cousin had challenged him to a fight the night before. He was fined 10 shillings and 6 pence. In 1912, he was fined 6 shillings and 8 pence for riding a bicycle without a headlight. On the 27th of November 1914, he married Ellen Maud Crooks at the Docking Registry Office. It wasn't long before they started a family, the birth of a baby boy in 1915 who they named Leslie. He was followed by Lovell in 1917 and Peggy in 1918. Sadly, Peggy died an infant. A daughter Lily was born in 1919. On the 12th of May 1922, tragedy struck. The headline read, "A Fisherman's Death." It said, quite a gloom has been cast over the village on Friday morning, when it became known that Arthur Luce, aged 39, a married man with 3 children, had been found shot in his own house with a double-barrel shotgun by his side. The discovery was made by his wife, with whom the greatest sympathy is expressed. His body was identified by his brother Henry, a fisherman who said he enjoyed good health, but suffered from pains in the head. He had sunstroke when he was a lad. He said lately he appeared very worried. His wife Ellen said he got up at 5 o'clock and said he was going to fetch his boat as the tide was up. He went downstairs, and about 5 minutes later she heard a gunshot. She ran downstairs and said, "Oh Arthur, what have you done?" but received no reply. She said he had recently been worried about some cockle lays which he had recently had to give up. The coroner returned a verdict to the effect that Luce died by his own hand, but there was not sufficient evidence to show the state of his mind. Ellen remained in the village the rest of her life. Her son Leslie would follow in his father's footsteps and worked as a fisherman. Her other son Lovell worked as an aircraft fitter. She died in 1956, aged 75. So rest in peace, Arthur. You will be remembered. Family is what's important, and we often forget our ancestors' siblings would have played a huge part in their lives. By chance, I got in touch with my grandmother's second cousin, who told me she had some old photos of family. Her grandmother was my second great-grandfather's sister, and today I will tell you her story. Harriet Batterby was born in Dersingham in 1878, and was the 3rd child of Robert Batterby and Margaret Grief. Her father worked as a horseman on a farm on the outskirts of the village. In 1908, she married Walter Back in Dersingham, and in 1911 the family were living on a farm in the small Norfolk village of Fring. Ernest was working as a team man. By 1918 they had 6 children: Ivy, Florence, Ada, Walter, Ernest and Ruby. Despite having a big family, in 1928 Harriet took in my great-grandmother's youngest brother Raymond, who had suffered ill treatment at the hands of his father. I never knew it was Harriet who took him in, but after reading the newspaper report, it said he was taken in by an aunt in Little Massingham. After chatting to my distant relation, it became clear it was Harriet, as she lived in Little Massingham during this period. Harriet passed away in 1935, aged only 57. The funeral took place in the parish church in Little Massingham, with Reverend F.L. Berrington officiating. Mrs. Morris was at the organ, and the hymn, "Just As I Am," was sung. Walter passed away in 1971, aged 87. So rest in peace, Back family. You will be remembered. Imagine seeing a picture of your ancestor from 1835, 5 years before the first photography studio opened in 1840. This is exactly what happened when I reunited this picture with a descendant. Elizabeth Nouns was born in 1814 in Berkeley Heath, Gloucestershire. On the 5th of January 1835 she married John Leonard at St James in Bristol. This portrait is from her wedding day. In 1841 they were living in Tiverington, Gloucestershire, where John worked as a farmer. They had 4 children: Elizabeth, John, William and Charles. In 1851, the family were living at Rookery Farm, Hamfellow, Gloucestershire. They had 3 more children: Thomas, Henry and Amy. They also had a house servant and 2 farm servants. In 1861, they were living at Leamington Farm, Lee Delamere. They had 1 more son, George. They also had 4 servants. Sadly, her husband passed away in 1873, aged 68. By 1881, the family were living at Hampton Terrace, Bedminster. Elizabeth is listed as a butcher. Her sons George and Thomas are also butchers. In 1891, the family were living at 14 Hampton Terrace, Wells Road, Bedminster. Living in the household was her grandson Edmund Fry, a carpenter's apprentice, and Ellen Brooks, who's listed as a companion. Elizabeth passed away in 1896. She was buried in Thornbury, Gloucestershire on the 30th of March. This portrait would have been taken to a photography studio in the 1880s and made into this cabinet card. You can just imagine how treasured it must have been by the family. Last year, I found Elizabeth's great-great-great-granddaughter in Canada and posted the photo to her. She was absolutely delighted to receive it, especially as she had done her family history, but never imagined she would see a picture of Elizabeth.